Okay, everybody. I hope you enjoyed lunch. We grew. Good for coming in the room and joining us for the rest of the meeting. You want to say one sentence who you are? That was not a sentence, I'm sorry. I am doomed. Okay, good. All right, I hand over to Simon, who's running this session. Please. Fantastic. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd just like to introduce a couple of people. So we have Laura here from UKNO, who's Resilience Advisor in our DRNU team, and he's going to camp out today. And then, critically, this little guy here, who you can see, Stu Sullivan, in the corner of the room, is diving in from Toronto, right, Stu?
Yep, from Toronto.
Excellent. And as you can hear, Marvel's technology, you can hear him as well as see him. So he's going to give one of the presentations. So first of all, I just wanted to do a few opening remarks. So basically, I think we probably all agree, one of our jobs is to step back from the coal face and just look at the whole waterfront and think, are we doing too much or too little in certain areas? And this area, with climate change and environmental sustainability, I felt like it was, and so did my team, felt like it was worth having a look at. Hence pushing for it to be on the agenda. So I hope you agree it's a worthwhile use of our time. Obviously, they are important issues for our beneficiaries, for all of us. I also think it's fair to say there is this general silo. You have the development types over here, and you have the environment types over here. Ironically, we have WWF UK's office sort of just over the road from here. We have plans to the other side of town to illustrate the point in a way. And really, moving forward, we have to be entirely intertwined between the two, and yet we say it, but we don't actually necessarily do it. For today's session, I just want to say one other thing. That said, I recognise there's an awful lot of change going on in the Planned Family at the moment, and so I'm sensitive to sort of adding another thing to the list. So I wanted to say that front. I also wanted to say, try not to be too prescriptive. So I have views on some of this, so do the people who come and put this together, but we're trying to sort of not be too leading and sort of open to the floor, and then afterwards we'll pop up with what we think perhaps some of the answers are. So I hope that's all right. And I think it's an area where, interestingly, I concluded we need to do more in some areas, possibly less in others, possibly we're flatlining in others. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. We're definitely not doing enough in this whole area, we're definitely doing too much. It varies once you slice up into so many different areas. So just on the session, so we have these two objectives to assess where we are now in climate change and environmental sustainability programming across the Planned Family, and then to identify how we can deliver and mainstream these issues better. The first one, first of all, I'm sorry that there wasn't beautiful pre-read. I was very much hoping we would have a paper that summed up where we are now and you could read it beforehand. On the plus side, we have tried to use as much data as is available to illustrate where we are now. But it does mean we'll sort of spend most of the first hour trying to sort of baseline this, and is this the assessment that we've got. So we're going to hear from Stu, who is basically representing the Climate Change Working Group, which is a group of about 30 people across the Planned Family. We're going to hear from him on his general assessment, their general assessment of the group, about where we are, not just on climate change, but on the environmental sustainability piece as well. Then we're going to hear some sort of snapshot case studies. Beatrice is actually going to talk about, how SPNO have expanded their business. I'm going to be talking more about minimum do no harm to the environment standards, and then we've got those out there, along with Dave, who's going to talk about, I need to put a KPI to help with that, and Dave's going to talk about a policy to help with that. So over the hour, I hope we won't have a comprehensive picture, but hopefully we'll have 80–90% of this is what we're doing, this is where we're at. And then we can flip in the second hour to sort of splice up and sort of this into 3 or 4 chunks, and then we'll break up the groups and try and say, are we doing enough in these, or too much in these 3 areas. I do want to emphasise up front, I'm not an environment climate change expert. In addition, we've had fun with this. My environment advisor pushed so hard for this, then left 3 weeks ago, which is a helping session. Jess Cook, who's based in IH and a member of the country's working group, has been fantastic helping pull us together, but it's in the field with radio today. So I'm very grateful to both Moira and Stu, who sort of waded in later in the day to help out with this. And I'm hoping, technical questions, I'll do my best, but I can throw to either of them if it's beyond my technical knowledge. It's got a high chance of winning. So on your tables, you've got this. I just left a few hard copies in the middle to remind yourself throughout. And then underneath, there's a more detailed one-page sort of concept notes of that in the running order. So if you're confused about where we've got to, whatever, just shout. If there aren't any comments, questions, otherwise we'll go straight in. So if you were doing this in the right order, the first presentation will be Stu. Beatrice has to leave to go across the road shortly, so we're just going to flip. And SBN are going to go first. So just bear that in mind. So instead of having a sort of broadly, this is where we're at, and then snapshots, we're going to have a snapshot first. So it'll feel a little bit out of sequence, but anyway, we can't do places at once. Yeah. As you pointed out.
The thing to be so important.
Yeah, exactly.
How we started at the very beginning, when you are making an important book like this, you have to be at the same time in 2 different places. It's a bit challenge.
So over to you for just a quick SPNA snapshot. We're going to, rather put this full screen, we're going to leave it like this, I think, just as polite, so we can actually see that Stu is there. That's why we're not on the screen. Hopefully you can see.
Here, right?
It's just the screen.
Okay, so thank you. I'm going to do I will go briefly over the project that SPNO is currently having on climate change, green energy, clean energy, and renewable energies. I really don't want to go into detail because first of all I'm not familiar with them, and secondly I don't think this is a problem. No? I mean, for us, all this related to clean energies is very important. Already since 3 years ago, we started to have small projects here and there. And in the last year, we really increased basically in terms of budget because we got an important grant that I will go now in Sahel that really give us a strong boost on this area. No? Just to have a little bit of overview on what were our current projects. Basically, we are working in the Sahel, in the area of Guaro. This is where we have our most important intervention. In Liberia, we had things already finished. We were working with our colleagues from GNO for contributing to give technical assistance to some solar panels in Liberia. In Nicaragua, we are having with the Spanish cooperation some digital training for young people. In Uganda, we had also it's about finished. Okay. So it's Rwanda, Uganda, as I said, Sahel is our main area of intervention, Niger, Mali, and Senegal. Well, this is the first project that I want to explain to you. Last year, we got a grant of 9.5 million euro. This is the biggest grant that we have ever with the European Union to fund a project called Women and Energy. No? And it is in 3 countries, it's in Mali, Senegal, and Niger. We just started like 3 months ago, so we are at a very, very early stage. First of all, we have to recover from the shock that when we learned that we had this grant. It was a huge grant. and I mean, even if we had experience in this area, still it was really very, very new for us. So it was really first of all a shock, and second it was a challenge and a nice boost to continue in this area. So it is in 3 countries, and basically it is to fund 600 microfinance group, which can be either in groups or 6,000 women if they are individuals. So the setup, as I said, it hasn't started yet, so everything's a little bit more or less in the air. It's what is on paper, but it can change this for 5 years. It's a big time. And at the end of the day, we'll be 20,000 women who attend this. Basically, the idea is that these women, they can have access to microcredit for the nursery and the project funded by the European Union. They will, let's say, grant 50% of these micro grants that they have to give back them. And then these credits that the women, as individuals or as groups, depending, they get it from is to be reinvested in clean energy. And this clean energy, it can be, basically for domestic purposes, for training, for micro companies that they want to start up related to food security, agriculture. I mean, everything related, of course, to the self-employment or what they do. So this is the basic and the most important ideas. As I said, they have like 3 pillars, which is the training that we also give to the women before they ask for this credit. Then the project will provide to the interested women training for the business that they want to develop later. Then we will make sure that they have access to sustainable services, and there are some private banks, I'm not sure if they are kind of microfinance institution. I don't know very well the nature of these institutions, so I don't want to go into details on this. That they will have the credits from them, and then we will do also advocacy and awareness of the power of the women on this. So these are the 3 main pillars of the project. And then here also, there will be like 2 main stakeholders benefits from the project. One, of course, is the group of the women that directly will profit from this project, and the other one is also the private sector, that they can be either the financial institution that they provide the grants, also the local independent electric operators that they will run after the system that will be put in place, in case that some of the women will want to start this kind of projects, and the renewable energy system distributors. So they will be like the private sector who will profit from it, and of course the main beneficiary will be the women, the new entrepreneurs, women, and the saving groups. They will run their own projects, one that they get the credits and they can invest in their own research. Some figures. In theory, will be in 600 villages. In most of them, there are this is a planned area where we have also children that they are sponsorship there. 600 saving groups, but as I said, these figures they can change over the 5 years of the projects. And then I will just move. I don't want to go too much there because we still have in Uganda. In Uganda, this is a project that is just finished. We are presenting now the renovation of this project. It is youth economic empowerment for green jobs. In concrete, this is to produce second in an ecological way, and we also give training to the women who are producing them to join the chain value and to market this kind of product in the home markets. So we work also with organizations in the growing sector, and we also provide technical support for this kind. So it is agriculture, food security, but it is very much related to this economic empowerment for women. In Rwanda, we are having 2 kinds of studies, which is funded by the World Bank and the University of Johns Hopkins. We are studying how they improve food stuff. They can be in the refugee camps in Rwanda. They can be they can prevent sexual harassment for women. They prevent them to go out to cut the trees, to do the cooking there. So just to improve the system for cooking with the cooking stove. It's a study, only study, and we are in the second year. Well, in the first year because have been quite late, but it is a study, and we are just expecting to have the results soon, I guess. The extension of this project, which is funded by the World Bank, and the other one was with the Johns Hopkins. And this, this is the main project that we have, and this is just to wrap up because one of the internal discussions that we have, internal and external, just plan to renewable energy, and it's out of the strategy. This is a strategy. This is something that with a new strategy we have to challenge to see how we can channel this kind of intervention into the new strategy. So, and then we want to present clean energy and and renewable energy to bring solution or call it as you want, as really a cross-cutting issue for the ministry. Of course, the agenda transformative approach, it can be, at the end of the day, when the women they benefit from this kind of innovation, for example, in the project of clean energy, then clearly it is a gender transformative projects. Then it supports education. In Nicaragua, we are having a digital training supported by solar panels. So it is clearly coming into education. It is an economic empowerment for women and people. And it can be also economic empowerment in emergency. For example, food security in some refugee camps, we have not yet any project, but just we are in contact with some donors. They introduce like solar panel for energy distribution. They can be applied also for emergency contexts, and also for security issues. For example, in the Rwanda study for the refugee camps, it showed that the fact that the women that have food stuff, they prevent them to go out, so they are less sexually harassed, so it's related to security. Also, public life in the streets. So it's really a cross-cutting issue that we are fighting to present the plan as not as independent sector or something that has to be seen as isolated and construct solar panels, which is not the case. Also, to do so, but really to focus on what is the main strategy. Basically, what we do at this moment, and what we are planning to do.
Fantastic. Can you, in terms of this being a sort of example of how you grow green business,
yeah,
your green portfolios, can you just explain a little bit about how you went about doing that? So, did you employ 5 technical advisors and climate change advisors before you won the first one, or how did it happen?
No, we've invested already in 3 people. I've been black for 20 years, and then there were already 50 persons there. 2 they were more related to some security projects, a little bit of doing everything, and 1 was a technical expert for microvoltaic solar panels. And we were having the Iberia project with GNO, and 1 project in Niger and another in Mali, very much focused on solar panels, and this person was the one focusing on this kind of thing, while the other 2 were more doing a little bit like what happened that 1.5 years ago when we got this huge grant, the other 2 they really draw, into this green business, to this support. This project was written by this expert, Adele, right, with another 2, with 1 external consultant that we employed to write this. Currently, we have employed another person to handle this project, which is based in Mali, who will be based in Mali. So now we are on the same floor, because we are the report. And that is it. For the time being, we will see, and I think that with this women and energy, we will be maybe more extra, additional support, because it's a huge project. And I said it is, also for the country, this is a huge challenge. Suddenly, the Senegal, Niger, and Mali, they were just, so it's really huge, a huge project, a huge intervention, very new for all of us. It's a huge opportunity also to position not only SPNO, but also to position the plan on the sector, besides social European Union and this area. So,
okay. Perfect. Very quickly, any questions?
Yeah.
I'm wondering which program of the EU is funding that? It's difficult. Can be maybe electrified? Yes, electrified. Sure.
Brilliant. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, Stu, are you there?
I am. Yep, I'm ready.
Just so that we can see the PowerPoint at this end, I'm afraid I am going to expand it on the screen, so we'll lose your lovely face.
No problem.
But we can hear your voice. Please don't be offended. Great. So just to remind people, this was put together. This is sort of a. I think there are 29 people involved in the climate change working group, which come from across the Plan family, and then a little bit of input from Moira on the environmental sustainability side. The fact that we sort of had to cobble this together through goodwill and people here, people there, actually I think that's in its own right. But I'd say that therefore you treat this. This is I call it an informal NOPD paper. It's not a it's not a signed off position paper or anything like that. It's just we've looked at the best data we've got, and we've put this together. There may be better stuff out there. If there is, we don't know about it. So just keep it as an informal paper if you can. Okay, Stu, over to you.
Sure. So I just want to start by thanking all of you for giving us the opportunity to present some of the work that the Climate Change Working Group has been looking at and that the different NOs and COs have undertaken over the last almost 10 years now. So the CCWG is a great example of how we have been collaborating and working thematically together, and we've done a lot of work around sharing information on advocacy and key influencing asks, but also on sharing knowledge on program development. So for the purpose of this presentation, it's split into two sections. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about our work around climate change, why it's a rights-based issue, and why we are supporting communities to adapt to these ever-changing environments. And then quickly touch on how within this group we've seen environmental sustainability and tried to embed that into some of our programs and talk about the importance of applying a lens around environmental protection and environmental stewardship. And that will hopefully provide a little bit of a foundation that will then go to Simon's presentation talking about his UKNO's very innovative Do No Harm KPI. So why do we need to integrate climate change and why is this important to plan? So I'm not going to go into all of the technical details about climate change. We would be more than happy to have some sessions on this or to share some information on some of the materials that we've provided. But for us, the key is that climate change is an intergenerational issue. Children and youth have not contributed to the causes of climate change, and yet we know from PLAN's research that they are bearing the blunt of these impacts. Climate change disproportionately impacts women, girls, and children, and seriously impacts their rights to safe livelihoods, to well-being, and to education. And we have a number of programs targeting these different impacts and trying to support communities and women around this. And climate change is a significant threat to gender equality. And this is not just on the direct impacts, but also is around the adaptation strategies. So the lives and livelihoods of women and girls is significantly changing because the environments they live in are changing, and this is causing women and girls to live in ever stressed, ever more conflict-ridden, and ever more vulnerable situations. And so addressing and understanding these risks and building these risks into our projects is critical in order for us to undertake and achieve the transformational projects that we're looking at. So I've highlighted a couple of our core programs and our expertise here. And the importance here is to show that this is not something that is new to us. This is something that we've been doing, but that we haven't necessarily been highlighting the incredible success that we've having. And it's also to show that we have the tools to be able to scale up and to adapt things. So Plan International's core program is called Child-Centered Climate Adaptation. This is supported by ANO and GNO and is mostly focused in 10 countries in Asia and has a couple countries in Latin America as well. And there's some very impressive research and learning on tools and on how climate is impacting young girls from this work. We've also, through this partnership, worked with the Red Cross Climate Center and developed a number of gamified learning tools that have been used in the school system and in youth groups, which has shown really impressive impacts and has won a couple of awards. And as we have moved forward, there have been a number of tools such as ANO's recent framework on gender transformative climate change, which have really pushed things forward. I mentioned this climate change working group that has worked on this presentation and has tried to put together some of this learning. And as part of this, we've also been the co-chair of the in the Children in a Changing Climate Coalition. So that's a little bit of our high-level successes. I wanted to also highlight that the climate change work is really happening more than we think. Even though climate change isn't explicitly coming out in the AOGDs and in our strategy, 24 countries have a focused climate change project right now, and this does not include YEE grants such as Green Skills. We have some investment, some NOs even have significant investment looking at technical expertise. Beatrice just talked about the fact that SPNO has 3 people within a unit looking on energy, environment, and climate change, and they've shown how that investment has turned itself into quite an impressive win rate and some very impressive projects. And we have 42 million euros currently in active climate change, disaster risk reduction, green skills, and renewable energies project. So this is not an insignificant component of our portfolio, but it is an area where there are opportunities to grow. And you can see this on the chart on the right, is that in the most recent available CSPs, 81% of those CSPs highlight the importance of climate change and include climate change in their objectives. So the climate change working group has really been trying to work with NOs and COs, trying to build on that local expertise, trying to bring in increased technical expertise, and trying to understand how best to achieve impact and to scale out these programs. And when we talk to the COs, they really understand how their environments are changing and how climate change is really impacting communities at the local level. So in terms of a couple of our key achievements, I just wanted to highlight 3 core areas. The recent DRM review that was completed about 9 months ago highlighted that the influencing work that we have had on on climate change adaptation through the Children in a Changing Climate Coalition has been, quote, very successful in bringing children's and youth voices to the issues of the negotiating table and global conferences. And this is a really important part around the rights-based approach that we take to climate change, bringing girls and young people into these discussions and being able to have them as the key actors, being able to drive climate adaptation. We've significantly contributed to a number of the global frameworks and global events around COP, around gender-related dimensions of disaster risk reduction, looking at climate change, and we've developed some very strong partnerships with some of these key advocacy groups. And most importantly, to me at least, is that we've developed a strong research base that others are looking into and that others use as they develop and look at climate change and the impacts on women and girls. And so we really do have this unique niche that we can work in because of our focus on gender transformative programming and our focus on youth that other organizations in the sector are not really looking at. And we have these 4 tools and pieces of research: Weathering the Storm, which is a foundational piece of research looking at adolescent girls and climate disaster risk reduction that has been very widely referenced by actors in the sector. We have a very new piece of research coming out of this 4CA work on climate change in young girls in Thailand that GNO has recently put out. We have a gender transformative climate action plan in the Pacific, and I believe Dave is going to talk a little bit about this. And as Beatrice just mentioned, there's this research piece on cook stoves and fuel efficiency in the humanitarian setting. So there are real opportunities for us to build on this expertise and to embed this in the other areas of programming that we have. And part of the way we've done this is through linking in our work on environmental sustainability. So historically, this is a new area and one, as Simon mentioned in the introduction, that we haven't necessarily invested hugely in the past. Plan International did have a environmental strategy between 2014 and 2017. However, that policy is now expired, and the officer position that was in place is no longer around. But there are a number of NOs like SPNO, CNO, ANO, and UKNO that are trying to look at how to address environmental sustainability through capacity at the national level and how to support the capacity building at the CO level where there is low capacity. In terms of our experience and the launch points that we have to be able to take this forward, ANO has a recently developed policy with strong safeguards and environmental considerations built in that they've been developing as part of their ongoing support and work with the Asian Development Bank and with DFAT, and there's a lot to learn from in there. As I mentioned, CNO, I am here, and we've been looking at our portfolio and trying to understand how environmental mitigation activities can be applied across our portfolio and have some interesting learning across the health portfolio and integrating waste management into the health sector. SPNO has this very impressive climate change, energy, and environment team. Yep.
Can I get you to speed up a little bit?
Yep. One more slide. This is it. With some very impressive wins. And UKNO is currently piloting a KPI on do no harm in the environment, with all of their projects aiming to be environmentally aware. And Simon is going to speak about that shortly. And so I just wanted to try and leave that there and try and show, that through some of these foundational pieces and through our achievements in linking environmental sustainability through our project portfolio, linking the climate adaptation projects on building awareness and knowledge for environmental management, supporting climate resilient livelihoods, really focusing on this child-centered approach and understanding how youth and young people can be the actors to this change, and understanding some of the successes at the office level, how we can really build in and bring in some of this expertise for environmental sustainability. I'll leave it there for now.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. Any brief questions? We'll try and keep main questions. It's helpful you see what your presentations are first, but if you've got any specific clarifications or... No, is that all right? Great. So thank you so much. It's fantastic, and I know never easy to do when you're not in the room. I'm just going to flip now to Dave, who you'll be delighted to know doesn't have a presentation, but is going to just talk about ANO's experience.
I am the presentation. So I've got it's fairly straightforward. We've shared the policy around. Simon just asked me to say something about it. I think it's more about the kind of drivers and contextual issues around that policy that were just something that was a drop as we went through. It's a very straightforward methodology in a sense. But our drivers for that policy, just to be really clear, one is geography. We are our neighbours on the Pacific Islands, where climate is an existential, primary existential. Obviously, it is the number one issue. And so we've been working on climate change adaptation for quite a while, and in that work, it's become a really clear kind of not just a threat, but an expectation. We kind of walk the talk, have a perspective, really high awareness about the environmental management. We did follow a kind of do no harm principle, and what we realised is the bulk actually of our portfolio, our generalised portfolio, was in wash, food and livelihoods, and working with governments like APD, broadband, and so actually our program portfolio was driving us to really be really aware and really clear about what our environment is. And then increasing and quite strident expectations now from not just donors but all of our partners about a real clarity on not just superficial kind of environmental standards of lip service, but actually really holding safeguards, having a policy level, making sure that our entire portfolio of mainstream and individual project areas actually turns off the mitigation. So it is a formal requirement at the Australian frameworks now. It wasn't previously, but they actually require a policy that actually changes, not just a policy. So that was the driver. What we found was quite interesting was that it is quite a complex terrain when you get into it, because we immediately ran into federal and state level legislative and regulatory environments that are highly complex. We kind of gave up trying to map all of the descriptions of that environment over us because we were utilising Australian government funding. They applied, even though we were applying that funding. And so we started to have to be aware of, in a sense, the kind of red lines, as we said, the federal and state Australian-based regulation. So the lesson learned there is steer well away from heavy focus requirements. So I use an example, environmental impact assessments, not actually put that into the policy. Because the formality around an environmental impact assessment in a government is immense. And it will kill the program before you do so. Even the interpretations of what constitutes significant environmental protections are much, much different from what we do. We are very small. But if we say we have significant environmental impact, many of our narratives, that resonates with a legislative environment that says significant environmental impact, you're in trouble immediately because they're talking about a $150 million kind of initiative or $2 billion desalination plant. So I just say that because it is actually a really important because we can actually run into products. So actually that's why our policy is about environmental protection programs. Deliberately scaling back from our operations and our footprint in Australia. Because that actually falls in a whole different sector. Yeah, it's quite precise actually. So we're searching for simplicity, but then we also have to try. So it's pretty straightforward. We think the kind of purpose of principle which we need to roll into the program portfolio cycle itself. The ability to actually build our capacity to implement environmental protection as a principle. not just meeting a compliance. We are committing to say we will work with contractors, partners and other partners to build out electric capacity for fairly in-depth environmental impact. So that's a commitment, and that's the across the portfolio. In order to enact that, basically the modality is pretty simple. It's a screening. It's fairly straightforward for most people. So this is to really look at the environment, understand it, to get an idea of some of the grading, which allows you to read the screen, where they categorize different projects. They expect to see a proportional application of efforts across the projects. That's really what this is. Category A. These types of projects require in-depth environmental protection analysis and evaluation. Section B, section A, category C. That's really it. We work with our team. We have 2 experts on environmental and sustainability as part of the other day jobs. One senior and one advisor. They are right. They are the focal point projects. In our project cycle, we do the appraisal. The appraisal has to be booked in. And if that section of the program design document is not actually cost. So it's a fairly hard line, to require. So that's really what that policy is. It's pretty simple, it's straightforward, but it's actually quite profound in terms of our portfolio. And I think that it is very principled, but it's something that we really do to get serious and we have to realize that clients or we should be doing this. And I don't want to go back too much. You said focus on policy or on climate change stuff. So I think Stu's probably covered a lot of
exactly. That's great. Okay, perfect. Similarly, any quick clarifications or? All right, great. Thank you very much. So I'm going to talk about UK as well. So if you think what we're doing here, and then go to this.
This is your development, so hats off to you because this is being pushed by many of our government, like Global Affairs Canada. Do you foresee or has there been any discussion of IH taking it up as a global policy? Because this is one of the big gaps we are seeing, and it keeps coming back again and again from all over. Where is Plan International's environmental policy? So, do you see any interest in IH taking it up? Because they can literally build it up from you. You have done most of the hard work, or has there been any discussion with IH on it?
Short answer, I mean, Stu could probably answer that better because, and because up until 2017, we didn't actually have a strategy and global reporting on environmental impact. I'm not sure what's happened from them, but maybe that could be Stu.
Stu, can you answer that?
Sorry, I was just going off the mute. My understanding is that there is currently no initiative to move forward with that, but I think that is something, as I mentioned, that there's strong expertise within the Federation, and it is something that we could do without too much new investment, but it would take direction from your team as a group.
Talk more about it in the second session.
Thank you, Stu. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about UKNO's harm KPI and a little bit about our business as well. And then we'll try and, so we're bouncing around a little bit here. We've got Stu doing a broad brush picture of where we're at. We've got SPNO talking about growing our business and the amount of green stuff we do in our portfolio, which for me is very different from environmental sustainability and making sure we're doing people no harm. And within that do no harm piece, there are obviously different tools you can use to ensure that you're not doing harm, and the policy is one. UK engineer also has one. It's specific to NOs, to talk about his. I'm going to just talk about a couple of other tools you can use on that more. As they said, it mustn't be, I don't think, which just got to be in the standard tick box. It is a value statement, it needs to be substantive, this is a very important issue. But nevertheless, there is also a regulatory place to Australia or globally standards. I just want to put this. So this is you have to take all of this in. This is the policy and program that we call the Vision House, which it's all consistent with the global strategy and the UK's wide strategy. And I put this in place when I started just around 2 years ago because I didn't want to have a whole program strategy refresh. But I wanted to sort of light touch thing. So these are our main objectives for UK policy programs, how we work. And, just like the rest of you, we constantly try to help country offices improve programs. We don't run any programs ourselves, we also care about meeting our targets, and then because we're also again with us as well, we're also trying to create policy decisions and advocate for them. But the thing is, just red circle here, we very clearly have environmental sustainability and resilience as two of our cornerstones, not just in the programs directorate strategy, but in the UK's own strategy as well. So our position will be stuff like that. Those. And this is very obvious. You've obviously got the sustainable development goals, the environment is right in there. And when we talk about environmental sustainability, in the sense relates to project-produced environmental impacts, both positive and negative. So just important to have that definition in mind. And some of this work was happening before I started by our one environmental advisor. And we basically was going to luck. Donor was a tour, so he wanted to do stuff on the environment, didn't want to go to the environment NGO, just another donor, actually wanted to help develop NGO mainstream environment development programs. So with a luck, we stewarded him well, one of his funding, one was the technical advisor, and she's been with us for 4 years, and moved on a few weeks ago. But I said to her after that 6 months, how are we doing? I assume you're not doing any harm to the environment. And that's completely not great. And we actually can hear about UK is not very effective. As helpful as we can do, not just great sales story, but actually quite honest. And she was like, no, we have no idea. I tried to get this into the programs department, and they're just not interested. It's another process to go through. And I was literally, as well as full office in moments, like, we tell you we are probably doing half the environment for our programs that we have no idea. So she did a questionnaire over the side, 82 of our large projects, to basically see are we doing harm or not. We then also did a bunch of capacity building, so fairly light touch, but she put a toolkit together, she did trainings for the program directorate, and critically, we can keep integrating across all of our programs. So again, there's a split. There's a mainstreaming across everything we do to make sure we're meeting the standards, and then there's growing the really specific program portfolio. And the two are also related, but it's important. Slightly apart. On this one, we have our program quality tool, which I'm sure you will have. And within that, we added environmental sustainability section. That's what we'll talk about now. A couple of slides. So this is basically, when I realised we weren't even meeting the minimum standards, it's like, well, let's focus on that before we do any other things about sophisticated environmental programming, which is initially comes in the environment. So we brought in this harm environment indicator. We are currently trying it because we didn't want it to be too onerous on people. It was another process, there was a lot of bureaucracy. There was sensitivity, particularly in the humanitarian team, when you are rapidly responding to a humanitarian situation. Can you bring this in as well at pace? Question mark. But critically, so all of our projects going forward have been a minimum score of environmentally aware. So that means we have this sliding scale. So environmentally blind means you are literally blind. You don't know whether you're doing harm or not. Environmentally aware means you have taken account of the potential negative and the positive, so you have actually looked at it, and you've put in place things to at least remove negative side things. So you can say it's doing no harm. So that's environmentally aware, and then sensitive and sustainable is obviously more sophisticated. You want to slide down the scale over time, but the critical doing harm is my priority, remains my priority. And that's sort of, just reiterating that point. So identify the negative impacts and mitigate the negative impacts environmentally aware. We've been trying it for 6 or 8 months now, and we've gone from 53% of our proposals, so we're still, there's been like 9 programs of proposals, and we're still getting more sophisticated on those actual running programs, because that's harder to start since they go on proposal writing. We've shifted quite quickly, quite dramatically, 53% environmentally blind, just in the road, to 68% environmentally aware. So we're quite real times of progress in quite a short time of time, just 6 or 8 months. And as I said, we want to push this to be 100% environmentally aware within the sort of 6 to 9 months. And then I can formally put it on as a KPI. I very quickly just want to also talk about the growing the business side, so sort of jumping back to the business as well. So here we got lucky getting this data coming in. That allowed us to apply to employ one senior executive advisor. Our green business portfolio has grown over those 2 or 3 years from about €1 million to €12 million. So in terms of ROI, which was $100,000 or whatever, that is an amazing ROI. And now we have donors stopped their funding after 3 years, but we will carry on full-time single sector advisor. I think that's probably my answer. Questions, clarifications. The point is, all of this, I'm sure, as I said, it's a work in progress. It's not perfect. It's a trial. But obviously, we need to share KPI, the original questionnaire, the toolkit, has to build and training, anything that's useful to our students. Is that all right? Yeah.
This is really, really good. Thank you so much. But Canada, Canadian government had a requirement for the last 10 years, exactly this. It has been a struggle because we never had an advisor. Every project, even if it's a $500,000 project that has to build a well, there is a requirement of no harm. And we have been always having trouble. Our approvals were delayed because they couldn't find it. So every grant for the last 10 years was halted because of they wouldn't release the money until you complete. And there are levels, etc. And we didn't have a person. So every time that the country office couldn't start the project because there was no environmental impact study, we had to hire a local consultant. So I don't know how much money we have invested in all of these projects where country offices are hiring environmental impact assessment person because nothing can be done. So it's so good to see that you're taking it up because I think people see only environment as a thematic area. The fact that every project, whether it's a WASH or MNCH or education we do, has an environmental impact, and I can write it down. Majority of the plans project are totally environmental. They could be even army. So we have found that through our little assessments. So it's a huge area. The fact that nobody has picked up, nor our donors, nor our public supporters, we have been lucky. So I think it's a time bomb. So it's not a question that we want to do it or not do it. we have to do it. I think the train is left long time ago, so I really congratulate you for taking it up, and please share with us, because we don't have tools, we're just going by project, so having some tools, KPIs, how can we do? And I bet other donors are coming on board. So it's not anymore a nice thing to do, it's compulsory.
Any other? Yeah. I don't.
Something that we can share.
Pardon?
It's very old. Things have moved past. I mean, that's what we were using. The other thing to remember is each country has its own environmental criteria. So your donor could have one criteria, your implemented project in, let's say, Tanzania, their environmental criteria would be different. And a lot of the donors are saying we have to meet our minimum standards, but also comply with local environmental impact the legal framework. And countries, even developing countries, are getting higher and higher. And that was our experience in Tanzania. Their government requirement was more stringent than the donor. And so they are asking questions as well. So I think creating a policy at the global level has to be broader for all of us. But for project by project work, I think it's going to hit us, the local laws as well. It's quite complicated, actually, to know to do it.
I think we've talked about three different things. So one, environmental sustainability as meeting an expectation of value.
Yes.
That's one. I don't think there's any argument. The second thing is, as you say, growing green business. Which actually, the question I have there is one that has been led by the leadership team at IAPS, is that should we be doing this? It doesn't fit the LGPs and it's not in the strategy. So we're saying kind of like this is a good area of growth, whatever, and they're up and then the third area is climate change adaptation, which actually isn't necessarily the same thing.
Yeah.
That's an adaptation more an area that's really about how we work in the basic question why we put people just finding out a little bit of
well, so right, so
one to the other.
yeah, you're absolutely right. So we are you're ahead of us, as you say. We put this together, this diagram, to try and clarify, because we're jumping around with different things. This diagram in the back of the envelope yesterday morning. We might want to play around with it a little bit. So the way I've represented it is slightly different from what you said, but we could change the rules or add it to one or the other. But the point is, it's child-centered, and when we are talking about different things, I've been talking about meeting minimum minimum standards in your policy. We've had Beatrice talking about the green portfolio. Some of us use presentation or huge amounts, some of us talking about influencing and advocacy and publishing reports and taking young people to the top and things like that. And then we talked a little bit as well about walking the talk, which is this also slightly, as I understand it, contentious area with IH, which is, all of us making sure our offices are environmentally sound, solar panels on the roof, so we try and cut down our flights, etc., etc. And there was a global policy almost from 14 to 17. There was one person I had working on this, and that was ended. So this is a bit like a green portfolio. I think it's an interesting. Do we want to grow it or shrink it, or how important to us is it? I don't know the way you put your. So I want to break up into these four groups of things. So if you want a fifth, you can add a fifth one on climate change, or if you want to restructure this, I'm very, very willing, because This was like, again, 8 scribbles back. Everyone existed, and we have representatives lines. So others have ideas on how.
Well, I would say that I still think that I'm kind of surprised how invisible the climate change is in our global strategy. And still it looks at the impact on girls and children. If we don't look at climate change, whatever we do, it doesn't matter because there is, I mean, if we don't look at that at the same time. So I think it is relevant to our program to look at how do we as organizations, so does it come to the...
So why don't we do this next, I mean, you could argue that it's the leadership bit in a way, but why don't we do this section at a fifth bubble? It's simplistically cutting the cake up, but you need to sort of do this to break up into groups to make it useful. So basically decide, do we want to do more or less, or which fits. So if is it fine to add a fifth group that is on the sort of climate change overall approach, that we believe that climate change should be an important part of who we are as girls? So that's not doing more climate change programming, which I would argue is growing your group portfolio. It's taking account of climate change and how it affects.
But I mean, maybe we should link this to our, just to add, because the thing is, just look 5 years from now, we are moving into a new global strategy and so on, and then maybe we will include again what has been the biggest DRM portfolio in the past, has been climate change adaptation and disaster reduction programs. The 24 programs that are up there, I would assume that the majority of them are coming from the DRM pots. And those are DRR projects and climate change adaptation projects. And that's different from the green portfolio, because those, actually, I think it's a missed opportunity for us to sell it as a green portfolio rather than to sell it as it's youth economic empowerment or it's GBV. That's what she presented as, sort of area of global distinctiveness. So let's not, try to squeeze in a new area, but more like the adaptation part is something that we were known for many, many years. The DRM business within Plan International was only DRR. That was what we were known for globally. That was what we were seen as thought leaders, and we do really good work. And the portfolio is huge. I mean, the Safe Schools programs in 35 countries. But now it's out of the global strategy. So this is one of the areas that we actually decided sort of to let go of. That was, something that we were doing well, but was then pushed out and didn't fit under one of the area of global distinctiveness as well. So I think adding a fifth that is sort of climate change, adaptation programming, or resilience, or DRR programming, because those are already ongoing, but they're not highlighted.
We have to just make that for today's exercise a fifth group, or we could replace it.
I would replace it because I would it's just a suggestion of thinking that if we try to, as from this group, push in another area that is called green, growing the green portfolio, while it's actually youth economic empowerment or GBD programming that we can actually fit it into. It's the same as the menstrual hygiene management discussion at WASH. Menstrual hygiene management, you can push it into, SRHR. Because it sits under there, so we don't have to have the fight over where do we place what. We can do the creative selling of what is the impact we want to achieve and so on. But we don't, I don't know. But it's more the portfolio.
Because influence comes in everything you do. If you want to bring a green portfolio to influence, to me, influencing is a tactic, or do you want to separate?
So Stu, I'll maybe throw to you on this one. I mean, the way the climate change working group see this and talk about it is programming and influencing. And I said, well, look, this is NOPD, it's program directors. Can we sort of dial down the influencing element? But it's still, personally, I find it quite useful to have it as separate, because you could push on green area, or as you're describing it, and not send young people to COP, and just say, look, we don't do that climate change, environment, global stage stuff. We just don't do it because it dilutes the girl brand, and we need to be going to CSW, not going to COP. So personally, I keep it separate. Stu, do you want to add to that?
I think I get the question right. I mean, I agree, Simon, that I think they need to be separate. I think the key piece here is that they're all interlocking components. So to go to COP, we need to go with evidence, and we need to have strong, innovative programming and research highlighting why youth need to be there. And then we need these strong voices at COP and at other influencing opportunities to reinforce why we need to be doing this programming and to do the advocacy, most importantly, at the local and national level and at the subnational level. And, you know, this is similar to the gender work that we've been doing, but I think, you know, we need to look at these different levels of influence and different levels of impact, and all of these pieces interlock into each other.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. They've all gone horribly small.
Just a suggestion on that. I think the influencing part is very important, but if you can kind of try to make it more in terms of how plan can evolve as a thought leader in that space. Because it's not just about influencing. Influencing is a kind of an action that follows. So that what is it that we need to do to become a thought leader? We are talking about the other elements are more of becoming a practice leader. But as a thought leadership, what is it that can be done? That is something to look at. So influencing is important. The minimum standards, I don't think we should be talking about minimum standards. We should just straight away say meeting environmental standards because they are now fairly well established. Countries have very clear standards which are there, which we have to follow. In any country or even globally, there are standards. So I don't think we can make it much upfront.
So I'm happy to change to meeting standards. I mean, there is not a minimum is because we're not meeting them. So the first thing,
environmental standards.
First thing we have to do.
Yeah, of course, it's a gradient, but the point is that the ask has to be. There are environmental standards which has to be followed. Like say, for example, if you're doing a wash project, constructing a toilet in a community, slush management has to be, and there are standards on how slush has to be managed. You can't just say that, okay, I just build a toilet with my own, with some fancies. So it's more of coming to that.
I think, though, the challenge is being able to record as the planned family that we are meeting those standards and that it's reflected in all our programming. So I agree that in each of the countries, we do have minimum standards that we have to abide by in terms of our programming, but being able to reflect that, are we actually doing that? And then adding that to the evidence base and feeding that into, again, how we're influencing the wider community.
So look, I'll make the change in a minute, okay? But what I quite like to do is, and it's helpful to have a bit of quick words with them, but to actually break up into groups of 50 minutes of attendance behind. And what I'd like to do is have the 4 groups on the 4 areas, and then each group just picks their one area and answers these 2 questions in that area. Right? So you're not trying to do the whole lot, and you're just going to be in one group. And then you'll apply these 2 questions to that group, to that issue, and then you'll report back. Okay? So the first question is, are we doing enough, too much, or too little? And then the second one kind of assumes, we're not doing enough, but not necessarily. So how can we do better faster? And we want practical examples. So the first point you made is like a practical example on influencing how we can do it better, or we can do it in a certain way. So think about practical examples. Organisations tend to be about people, processes, systems, money as well. So you just try and make it tangible for what we could do. What's the plan to sort of push in a particular area? Do people need to just do 1, 2, 3, 4, or are there people who are particularly passionate or have expertise in one of these and they'd like to volunteer do one of these? Or are you happy if I just randomly, random? Yes? So we'll make group 1 climate change resilience. Yeah, that's 1. Group 2 go clockwise, walking the talk. Group 3 reporting, and group 4 meeting standards. Okay, got that? Okay, so 1, do you want to go that one? 1 is the climate resilience DRR stuff. So to sort of grow what we do, but you're right, putting it in across what we do. Two is walking the talk, which is how our own environmental climate and carbon footprints. So that's over there. Three will be influencing. If you can maybe head somewhere over there, that would be good. And four will be meeting standards, environmental standards. Okay. Everyone got that? So, 1, 2,
4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, great. So 1 in that corner, 2 in that corner, 3 in that corner, 4 in that corner. And we've got about 20 minutes to chat, and then we'll go back.
I didn't complete that.
That is
She's still around. Yes.
she understands the setup of with the team.
Because that was the number of the order I just said randomly. People won't think that.
So I don't know.
So your number 3 is in
So I think before was the person comes security. So I don't know that we are also able to work with the person and So I think let's see once the pattern out is done, we should sometime in Europe. So maybe in
We have more force.
That's true. I don't know what the latest stage is, but my impression was that we are trying to.
I like that, straightforward.
Because the current medium is quite some things that there is another person answer. But if we feel that we cannot work it out well, it's fine.
Okay. I have to do that. So, two questions. I think we need the questions.
Okay. They are everything whether that's an incident to also. Let me go back also and I will see if I can do that actually
Once the financial rights more time. Yes, unfortunately, yes. So we have to first get support.
Just maybe trying to know how was the consultant
You're too, right. Head down there. Your voice. Four, right, four, brilliant. Okay. What happens if
Yes, one question. Yes, what things are you doing? The bar area is the question
Because to me, first there was the environmental impact, climate change. Is it all encompassing there, or are you talking about only this part of it? Because currently we have this planning mechanism that have an environmental. Doesn't have any. Oh, yeah. Whatever you call it, it has to encompass all of the things we
But on the second one, which is visual side, I only know the given program, given project design. That is there, and we said, this person also
One person that will always try to do rather than
Okay, so let's meet at around and maybe 6:30. You're living in Travelodge or somewhere? Travelodge. I'm also in Travelodge. So we will leave here at 5. I need to check in the baggage, check in the door there, and then we can meet. Because we are from here to Travelodge is about 5 minutes. Yes. So 6:30 or 6 or 6 is fine. Yeah, we meet in the lobby. Yeah, we meet in the lobby. Exactly. So that's so you know we get there for us. It's mainstream will be that
3 minutes left, guys. 3 minutes. At the moment, I mean, but we are. Because we just don't. It's this is the money that I'm expecting.
But it was very much report time downtown. So there was more states. What is the
climate change.
Okay, well, can you come back into the middle? Okay, guys, let's start. Who from group one? Right, everybody, can you take your seats? Please. Okay, fantastic. We've got about 40 minutes left, so we can hear a report back from the 4 groups. I think have maybe 3 or 4 minutes for each group with initial feedback, and then we have a general discussion for about 20 minutes, and we have a general discussion for the last 15 minutes. So that sounds okay. So group 1, which was the VA Climate Change Resilience DRI group, obviously I think it's going to report back. That was volunteer. So we had 2 major questions, if I recall correctly, for our group. The first question was, are we doing too much, too little, or thereabout? And we had 2 views in our group in terms of this. One view was that we're not doing enough. The plan should do more. This is the global challenge of the future. Countries are impacted and we should do more. The other view was, no, we should not do more. It's not our strategy. We have a global strategy and we should focus on that. If we start doing other things, we're going to lose focus and we will create distraction in a country of this level in terms of future resources. The second question was, okay, so how can we do more? How can we do better work in this area? And I guess the consensus, and I'm going to ask my colleagues who are on the panel to share their opinions. The consensus, I guess, was that we should look at mainstreaming the aspects of climate change and challenges in the other, in the global distinction. That would be a good approach. There was also an observation that after we learn more about the structure, so the DRM is a well-formal unit versus the management with a work group, informal group. It would be good if they could work and maybe they do it alone if they already work together. My personal view, I think, that one thing that we probably need to start doing as soon as possible, at least for the institutional donors, is what you cover, Simon, the standards. I mean, those who are donors more and more, I mean, I'm from SNO, and as everybody knows from don't believe in science and climate change. But this may change, other people may come and change, the business may change. And we shifted from all our donors being very much focused on this, but now everybody's afraid to the result of climate change. But, you know, the inexorable path of history and future is clear that we don't recognize this. And I think as an organization, we should at least do as soon as possible start from standards and you probably are the perfect target that you would mention why this
I just wanted a point of clarification that actually climate change and resilience is a formal role within the DRM team. And that role is handled by Jess Cook, who actually helped put together the paper that the presentation that Stu presented is based on. So I think that's important to note that there are resources. The question is, do we need more resources or not based on the needs?
Any initial thinking on that? We should go around the floor and do a discussion. Go to the floor. Yeah, I think the idea I add to that is that we have to listen to what donors say. So, yes, obviously it's in our control how much we're going to do, but we also have to respond to our customers and clients, which I know is let's go to team 2, walking the talk.
So walking the talk is about how we, as Plan, in our own behaviours, are ensuring that we're not harming the environment. And so we put together a kind of 3-step process. Doesn't necessarily have to be done in this order, but first of all, we need to have some kind of green or environmental policy and strategy or plan. And we talked about that needs to be driven by one of the decision-making bodies of the organisation, either the leadership team or the NDT, probably the leadership team. We also need to, much as UKNO started talking about measure first, we need to measure the impact of what we're doing, so set some internal ways to measure environmental impacts of our work. Examples might be around flights and alternatives, vehicle fleets, office energy use, procurements, and whether we need to have an environmental assessment criteria alongside cost effectiveness and time use and so forth. The use of single-use plastics, cleaner usage, that kind of thing. But there could be other items we want to pick up on. And if we measured them, we could then decide of them which were the ones where we could potentially bring about some change, and we could then set some ambitious targets to reduce our impacts, and we could consider ways to incentivise those targets. And kind of an ending question is, what should be our ultimate ambition? Should we be climate neutral? It seems highly unlikely we'll never be able to fly anyway. But what should we aim at? Where are we going on this? Is the intention just to be a bit better than we are, or is there some objective measure? Anything to add?
Let's take team 3. Let's go team 3.
Okay. We just realized we didn't decide on who is reporting back. But I took some notes.
It's a good start for the influencing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, we said, first of all, we just sort of put it for the record that we are doing quite a lot of influencing in this area. We all participate and have been participating to the COP for the past few years, and the same as we are participating for the Sendai Framework for Action, which is about disaster risk reduction. And this has been done in a very successful manner through the Children in a Changing Climate Coalition, which is also with UNICEF, World Vision, and Save the Children. So the sad part is really that this is sort of the DRM development divide, because this is sitting with the DRM team. So most of our development colleagues may not be aware of it. But we think that from our perspective, we should not see it as a separate sort of climate change initiative, but rather see it as lead. It's about providing the platform and the chance for children, and particularly girls and young women, to share their views on a particular issue, which is climate change, and doing that to the stakeholders that actually decide for what their future will look like in the country, which could be at the COP, which could be at the Center Framework for Action, which could be at any type of local negotiation and so on. So we don't have to frame it in sort of the sense of we are doing separate type of climate change work, but rather we are doing it in terms of influencing the stakeholders that actually decide for the future for these children and young people. Then we also said that we need to, in the influencing space, continue to keep an eye on climate change, because it's probably not going away. It's also coming up in other big forums, such as the CIDAB, which is one of the major forums where we are involved as well. There's also spaces to influence on climate change as an issue. But then again, it's from our perspective, it's providing the platform for children and young people to share their views on climate change. Not that we need to become a climate change expert organization in that sense. Yeah, I think that's sort of the breaking the silos and barriers in between, and see it as part of LEAD as well, not just general influencing for climate change standalone.
So just to clarify question 1, are you saying we're already doing enough?
Yes, more or less. We shouldn't drop the ball. That's more the risk that we see now is that, well, because people don't even know it, and it's not being sort of even showcased that this is actually a very successful model.
So we need some internal influence.
We need some internal propaganda to, you know, to even see, because it's really been successful. Like, don't underestimate the Children in Change and Climate Coalition. Before I started with PLAN, this was the only thing I knew about PLAN. They're really good in climate change. That's what I knew. And this is 5 years ago. That's why I joined, yeah, because I went to the Sendai Framework for Action discussion, and I saw PLAN bringing really good child advocates to challenge their own governments and saying, we want you to change. You are destroying our natural resources, you are destroying our environment, and we can't live here anymore. What will be our future in 40 years? Like, don't think that we'll be doing bad. We're doing really well in this. So let's not drop it, because, yeah, that's the biggest risk, rather than, we don't have to do more, we don't have to do anything. We just need to sort of continue and not dilute this because we think that it doesn't fit with the new structure, but I think it does. It's definitely a lead, like it's part of, you know, if we say that we want to provide platforms for children and young people to be agents of change, or what are they going to change? Maybe we want them to be talking about climate change because they want to.
And if I can just add, Stu is also prodding me to make this announcement that coming February, IH is taking the lead in organizing a resilience summit, which will, I think, highlight a lot of the work that's being done within the PLAN family, and hopefully cross this divide that we're pinpointing, which is happening between the two areas, DRM and development. So look forward for further notice.
And this is a standalone event, or linked to one of the bigger other events going on worldwide?
It's for the PLAN family, so it's a standalone event, which maybe will become something that's a bit more regular. In terms of the plans, I think that the invitation is going to be extended to a lot of yourselves who are here around the table. But as I say, stay tuned. That will be coming, I think, from Jacobo. More information to come.
I wonder why can't we link that to one of these UN conferences also? Not as a side event on the conference, but still.
No, this is internal to PLAN. The Resilience Summit.
Why is this internal? Why can't we open it up? I mean, we are the group three.
I can put it forward as a suggestion, but I think it's the idea in terms of what we were just discussing, that I think as a family, we're not aware of everything that it is that we're doing. So to get the message across the family. As for external events, what was touched upon the COP, there is a delegation that's going out there. It's being organized right now. Jess Cook is at the focal point of this, but again, the challenge is getting the participation actually in the sign-on from the different NOs. In the last, I think, 3 years, it's been a bit of a challenge. Last year, it was very successful, and Jess has done a presentation on that. The year before, actually, there was only one representative from the PLAN family. It was coming from the UK, and it was our environmental sustainability advisor. So I think in both forums, we need to shout out loud about the work that we're doing.
If I could just add from the walking the talk perspective, it might be interesting to try and link that meeting with what people are flying here anyway. Otherwise, the environment.
That's why it's in February. Exactly. That's why it's in February, because I think people are coming here in February for a different meeting. So there's talk about linking it to a meeting that already exists.
Yeah, which is the DRM Global Network meeting. Yeah, I would assume.
Yes.
That's all in February.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Okay, brilliant. And group 4.
So, there's never enough time, and most of our time figuring out question number 1. So we ended up at the easiest one. The answers were no, no, and yes. Agree? Group? Yes. There's Dave, you raised a very pertinent point. It's the fact that global plan globally has already signed on to a lot of stuff. We are actually committed. But none of us in the group knew which they are. So that could be a good starting point to actually map out. And I mean, your staff is no longer with us. Perhaps could have been a good fit for doing such a mapping to it. Then I think reflecting on the global area work that we're doing today, or the global expectations of us, it's quite basic what they asked us to do. Have you considered environmental impact in more and that? You could of course go deeper, but there's no real explanation. Talking on that. But then also, I think we all agree that this will be coming, so I would rather wait for the donors to tell us what to do. So in part, I mean, building on our existing commitments, perhaps there was an interesting suggestion in the local private sector already now maybe with environmental models and whatnot, or the private sector. Also, we should expect that donors in the future will actually expect us to have standards as they do with procurement and financial management, also applying to the environment.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments on that?
Maybe just to share, because I got our feedback from the spot check that CEDA has conducted on Plan International Sweden, but the Plan International Federation actually, because they consider us to be global, on environmental sustainability or actually an environmental impact assessment. And they checked all our different policies and standards and so on, and also did a spot check and traveled to Egypt, where they actually dig deeper into one project. And this is external consultants, and we just got the draft report. So just to share a few, maybe 3 highlights from this one, from this topic. The first one is we are not aligned with policies in generally, because there are so many different policies and different entities of the organization assigning to different standards. That was the we Plan International globally, because we shared also things from that was developed by UKNO and by ANO and by the Global Hub and by us and so on. And they said like, okay, which one is actually the one that Egypt should follow? That was what they asked. And the second thing that they said was we have low impact when they did the mapping for the project, the actual project, because we don't do big infrastructure projects. So we don't have to worry too much on sort of our actual negative impact. But the third thing they said was that we need to link better what the environmental impact means for our respective sectors. So the area of global distinctiveness, that we shouldn't think that it's an add-on on the side, that is actually something that is integrated into the program. And I thought these 3 sort of results I would like to share with you, because they did this for, I think it was 3 or 4 months of work, and 2 consultants that went around and so on. But I found the first lessons learned, I found very interesting, that all Egypt will get instructions from different entities, and like which ones should they follow? Because they don't get just funding from us, they will get funding from everyone. I will share, yeah, for sure. Yeah, we are just finalizing with the consultants. We can share the report.
One point to add, when you're talking about these standards, there's already this whole ISO thing, which is there. Is that something which plan could look at to see if we have that certification of 14001, which is the ISO certification for environment management systems.
Okay, anything else?
Well, it's just interesting. Someone I was just thinking of
spoke to many parallel things happening in a project-based level. We do need to get a mechanism, maybe the mechanism to do is kind of accept something that works for the organisation so that we've got something that is always approach to the same thing. So figure out a way to do that so we're more efficient, but also so we're more development planning so that we're all too much away or not. So that's not the way we want it to go. A lot more pragmatic and say how to make it work better for the organization.
So I'm not totally sure. We've got about 15 minutes left now to move things forward. So I'm going to suggest a couple of options here. One is that we sort of try and take off the table, if you like, things where I think we are broadly agreed, and then we spend the last bit debating the contentious issues. So I can sum that up as I think we all agree that we need to meet, this is like a no-brainer, we have to meet minimum standards, but there are actually smaller standards. Which standards? There may be global ones that we will sign up to the ISO. And it makes sense to be efficient to try and have as close to a homogeneous set as possible to the useful feedback you just given. On the other hand, there may be specific going this by that is particularly when the bar is just higher. So you want a basic baseline that we'll sign up to, and then there may be getting the markets where they're just required to the pilot. But I think this is relatively uncontentious in terms of the principle of doing it. How you resource up and coordinate across the families to drive this. I don't know if anyone else that may yet. I just sort of think about how we do that. But we've got mechanisms we move on already doing that. On the influencing, it sounds like you feel like we're doing a good enough job already, so we possibly don't want to go higher or lower. And then there may be a need for some internal influencing to illustrate to people what we do. I mean, I'm going to caveat that with a note of caution, which is sometimes if you put your head above the parapet, as if you don't expose yourself, people go, oh, you know what we're doing. No, we don't get caught, we don't do that. We just get backwards unwittingly. But hopefully, overall, that will be the case, and it's just this same thing. Walking the talk, it feels to me like it's important the values system and that on a values basis, and that we shouldn't be expecting with our programs, front officers to be doing stuff, and then we don't bother ourselves. As organisations, it's a symbolic thing to do, and there is this existing strategy 2014-17, which hasn't been really used. So there is good work there. And so personally, I'd say that let's at least have a look at refreshing that, and then it's still fit for purpose. With a view to agree with some direction of travel, so it doesn't mean we have to shoot by 2020 for climate neutral, but we have to at least show some a lot of right journey in the right direction of travel, which is getting better in this area, as opposed to the moment where it's just avoiding stuff. So there's a bit of sort of getting this back on the agenda. But we've got most of the agreements that we need. This one is obviously more contentious, where we've got split, and some people saying we should do more, and some people saying we should do less. So we could talk about that now. We haven't talked about this piece, which I think is actually very important. So one option is we have a bit of a debate about this for the last 10-15 minutes. Another one is the climate change working group put together a series of tasks. They're asks to this group, which initially Stu was going to present as part of his presentation, and I said I thought I was too prescriptive and too kind of pushing their agenda. but we've got that on the slides, one slide, which I've edited a little bit to, as we've been going along to try and reflect the conversation's been going. So it's sort of been we started sort of straw man we started with, and I've edited it a little bit based on the conversations we've had now. I can put that up if you like, or if you feel that's too descriptive. And there's too much of a general push that I can just leave it off. It's very much up to you. I think the one thing I would say about it is it places the leadership fit with good context. I don't know, yes, I won't be pushing it in general. I mean, I'll just stick it up, and you can sort of ignore it if you want to. Stu, if you're still there, you're welcome to come in on this, although, yeah, as I said, I've been editing it, so you haven't seen the final version. So let's just see if I can come up. So the interesting thing on this that I think is worth thinking on this is that the first bit, I think, is very much the leadership circle on this slide, which is recognising that climate change, environmental sustainability is a key part of protecting health rights. So it's part of the plan's global leadership of the Earth. Can't not talk about climate change and the environment. And arguably, we can't just ignore it and not do it, because we won't achieve what we want to do, which is the climate change transformation program. And that's where the leadership piece is for me. But if you also start from that position, it helps you work out the other bits. So that's then we talked about immediate action. I've changed it from minimum standards to meeting standards, local, national, and global. But with an additional focus on minimum do no harm. So let's just get back to the basics first. And that seems to be a no-brainer. Then there's this little contentious one, do we grow and reduce what we're doing? But I think what people are generally agreeing is we don't do climate-specific programming that much. We're target ones of growth area. We nest it, as you said, so it's green jobs. So we all sign up to yield, do that kind of empowerment. If a donor is how big that is a green jobs opportunity, then personally, I think it would be nice to be able to bid for that. That's a personal opinion. Some others may say, no, we shouldn't be doing that. That's outside of so I think that's still a big debate. And then we talked about influencing, that it should stay in probably we're doing about that. And we talked about influencing. So I actually think this is as I said, I've edited it with some comments, and we didn't want to too descriptive, but on the other hand, it's quite nice to come away from this with a mini manifesto for broadly reflecting where we're at. Because if we're going to actually make the most of the session and try and move the planned family in a particular direction, some directions here, then we need to have some kind of group. I don't want to agree that all of the other speakers are having a big debate. In my opinion. How we do that in terms of take this, we can summarise the meeting notes and write it up into a 2-page separate for all of the views and share with others, or what's the mechanism for this meeting and talking to
But for me, like the principal idea from here is not that we try to come up with one vote, kind of vote or something. That doesn't work. And like you said, there is kind of common understanding and agreement on 3 of these 4 points there also. So this can be set in the minutes or in the notes, saying, okay, we as NOPD think that, and here we have different thoughts on that, and these are the reasons for that, and these are the reasons for that, and that's it. But for me, actually, I would like, if you still have time, etc., whether we should discuss 1B a little bit more now, because just to share the arguments once again, why should we reduce this, our activities there? What is the logic behind it, so that we maybe move on that way?
You have to do that for 5 minutes. I mean, is it unfair to have an intuitive show of hands who wants to do more, who wants to do less? Is that too blunt?
Well, we can have it as a picture, as a snapshot to see where we are.
Then we need a second vote on the vote.
Yeah.
No.
But it's like, I think we are putting it a little bit too, because for me there's 3 options. It's 1, 2, and 3. So the 1 is we take the green business, climate change, whatever it is, and we do that. The number 2 is we only go for where we have the meeting point between children and young people and what they want and climate change. And the third one is no, we don't do it. You see what I mean? Because there's one that is sort of where we're sort of selling it.
There's the climate specific opportunities that come along.
Trying to stop climate change.
Yes.
Yes.
Very heavy climate change specific.
Yeah.
Then there are the core plan business, ESRHR opportunities, which have a green.
Exactly. That's the second one.
And then the third one is we shouldn't be doing any of this. It is very good. Everyone wants a second. Everyone wants a second vote Brexit. 3 elections. Our Brexit, it's the government's Brexit. So there's that clear thing. So there's a sort of going a harder climate change heavy dominant opportunities. There's a middle way, which is if it happens to be if it happens to be green jobs type thing, then we should absolutely carry on going for those. And then there's a low we should do some sort of.
It's 1 year debating this.
So because the group said was split.
No, the reason I'm saying is, who's pushing us out not to do it? We, as a group, if we all agree with, we know we have to do it. If not today, tomorrow. Things are happening anyway in the field, so why are we debating this option? Is it because it's not linked to ALGD? Because a lot of things are not linked to ALGD. So I think ALGD's purpose was to throw some light into topics where we were not good at, we want to grow. But that doesn't mean that everything else stops. Or am I being very simplistic in my views?
I'm aware of questions. Turn your presentation down the reference.
There's a very clear here, it seems to me, after the leadership team, certain types of programming are not aligned to the strategy, against the strategy, the end focus. Manifest statements, so it's boundaries. Another edit, sense. So I think there's definitely a sense that there needs to be some kind of boundary through it.
Hang on, first of all, to this one. There are people at the lab, influential people at the lab, David Thompson, presenting the funding model in the meeting of the board of the European Union office and talking about workstream 1, programmatic fit, about quality income. And saying, okay, we will have then definitions, what is quality income, and then the CO and we can tell the NO that these solar activities there in this country, they are not fitting anymore. And then they have to stop. So this is more or less original wording from somebody who is quite influential. That is for me exactly the reason that for me, I would like to have this discussion how we can kind of incorporate global, regional, maybe even national challenges which are out of our AOGDs but still fitting to them. And for me, I'm thinking that the whole thing is a matrix structure. We have our 6 AOGDs, and then we have topics, themes which are out there. Climate change is one, migration is another one. And these are not our topics as such, but migration, climate change, and you name the others are hitting our sector. And I don't know whether this is really an old issue or I like this, I've never heard that before, I think that's child-centered climate change adaptation. That is exactly what we are doing. And then, of course, child and then adults and girls and all this stuff. Yeah. So, and that is the reason I would like to talk about this. So, to put this clear that also climate change is relevant for our core group. And so we have to tackle that. Of course, not in general, the whole thing, but whatever fits to us.
And I think, sorry, just to add to that point.
Every AOGD has, the climate change has an impact or a connect with every AOGD. I don't think anybody can say that climate change is something else and AOGD is what we're talking about. No, that's wrong.
Who's that?
But,
This is good. We're going to get good debate, guys. Yeah.
I'd like to, I relate to that statement that Dave is sort of presenting about see that they're weak, that they don't have the strength of our organizations. Focus on really weak. I understand we need to meet standards and we have to. I think it's very important that we try to make a link between this thematic area. This area for our next strategy. I think
It's tensions, focus and be disciplined to do a few things and do them well. With, yeah, there is a real clearly impact on lives, and you can just stay touch as well as actually stops achieving our own objectives. And then you've got the balance of country officers and criminal plans with donors who want to make fund. So it's like 3 checks is an important aspect.
May I suggest to put this topic also on our list of things to discuss with that day? Because it's in general is that I have had similar negative comments about anything we do on WASH, and something we do on school feeding, not being supposed to be gender transformative or protection, but it's supposed to therefore not being aligned with the legislation. And a bit of a centralist type of comment saying that actually club should make an end to this. I'm not sure how that relates to a growth strategy. We have any growth strategy, it would be very difficult to just stretch all areas where we work. At the same time, say we want to grow. That's all open for discussion. I think Gabriela should have the opportunity to give some comments on that.
One challenge for us is to see how those areas that you're talking about could potentially support either gender aware or at no point. Not to say no to those, it is how are we transforming what we do in those areas to be that. The other thing I think, for this strategy, the areas have been decided. So, yeah, 3.5 years left in this strategy. But I mean, you mentioned horizon thinking and horizon planning. it's not like we will get to the time that we need in 3.5 years time. Not in the area of program. So there's work that needs to be done that will lead to the decision that we make in. This is an area in where it affects everyone's lives. So it makes a lot of sense anytime. It was really quite interesting. I thought maybe we were one of the only CEOs, but I see that most CEOs have included it as part of their exit strategy. So it is something that we see in our countries that it creates. And when we do the analysis of what are the reasons for many of the problems that the girls especially face, the climate change and the impact of the climate change as well. So that's based on the analysis and not just because it's also a trend.
This point is really useful because if we've got 42 million euros program at the moment, about 10% of 5% of our overall global income, and 10% of our programming in terms of the product sponsorship and institutional investment, which I think most of the countries, which is good enough for priority, because it's actually quite substantial. It's not 2 or 4%, it's really 10. So I mean, I suppose the thing is, if in a year's time, things have moved on, the funding model is reinvested in it, and you get that blog saying no to the next 10 million solar, then because that's decided this strategy. Yeah, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I want to push us a bit here as well, because sometimes solar counts as just solar.
Well, this is
solar.
So this is the problem,
and it's not linked to the other actually key areas of program decisions that we're talking about.
So if you go back to those 3 options, you get to vote on the pure climate change ends. The ones that link to our core areas that we are all around in that strategy. You're not doing anything. And like where does solar fit? It's somewhere between the 1 million and because it is one part integrated program as well, then it shifts back towards this. Let's say it's is green enterprises, where it's 7 power businesses.
Which is perfect.
That's clearly the middle one. If it's just providing solar panels for the houses in the village, that's probably outside, probably the first one. But it is a grey. If you're careful, that gives people any room to sort of do the claims to the majority.
It's a really about the circular discussion. There's no right or answer to it. I don't agree with the presentation necessarily. What's the type of key approach to that decision? Action for the best use of those all these decisions and prioritize
I think anywhere where climate change is the issue, talking about the very next few in terms of this. You're basically saying you recognise climate change does impact girls' rights, but it shouldn't be an area of girls. Or if you've got plans, where you put it, bring education to climate change. it's tough call. So, yeah. Or, do you want to respond to that?
Well, I think it's about what is the primary that we create the role important to 6 schools that we think basic. Or is it the priorities that we understand that 6 of those would be for girls or young people in Pacific, there is no doubt. May not. So we need to have some flexibility. Under the interest of what we think actually, like what is the and then and like I said, I see the strategy as a we try to keep balance actually there were other groups that I thought we had to not check that. We didn't have a choice. I think the question was asked earlier, will these choices stand the test of time? Going back to some of the initial discussion about actually wary with almost like this sense of I don't see this strategy as a strategy. This growth and innovation. We will only through those 6 areas and our interpretation.
Just very quickly to go back on this. I don't disagree, but I think that what it says about the corporate portion of science strategy. That's the real
Just want to say two things. Firstly, the first point one can say is one key approach, which doesn't mean is the key approach. And I still really want to underline what Detlef has said, because that I think makes really very much sense. It comes to also developing programs which are really also having an impact on children, youth, and girls, and where partners and our colleagues at the ground, so to say, should also have the voice to say what really matters and not what I believe the donor believes is the most important. Whereas, of course, I know one is always important. It's not about that. I was myself a program director before I became head of development in the EU office. I just wanted to say, look, why do we do research on Rohingya young adolescents? Because what happened is there was a conflict and war. But war and conflict is also not a key area, in my opinion, of Plan International. That comes again back to what Detlef said. If you see it as a matrix and say 6 areas we have where we are really, so to say, the experts, we work and we bring the experience, we bring the skills, we bring really ground knowledge, right? And when something happens with migration, conflict, war, climate change, etc., I think we are then the ones, who can deliver, in my opinion, solutions, ideas, who can partner them with others to ensure that we mitigate risks or develop something positive, to ensure that this is not happening again or whatever the topic is. So therefore I think the one is not excluding the other, and the 6 AOGDs are not constraining us to work when conflict happens, to find solutions when people have to migrate or to flee. We are in refugee camps, aren't we? Yes, we are. So why are we there? Because not they decided to become refugees, because there was a conflict. It's like with natural catastrophes, or when people have then also, right, when they have floods, etc. So we are there and we say, okay, our experience says, our knowledge on the ground when it comes to youth, children, girls and young women, that we should please, how about this program, because this is a solution. I mean, so what is the question here? Is it the chicken first or the egg? I don't know. Maybe because I'm too new. What would be speaking against it? As long as you are not, as you were saying, making fuller.
Yeah, I completely agree with that version of the world. It's very eloquently put. Other people in the organisation, plenty of people maybe don't look at it like that. And that's concerning because they're controlling the money at the moment. The discussions in political coalition in the next couple of weeks. So that view of the world is one system. It's a hard contention.
Maybe it's a question of explaining and helping the powers to be on how does it impact. So should we be coming up as a group and saying why is it important? Why does it impacts our strategy? It's not for something new. How is it impacting you? Because the strategy, the AOGDs were developed before the strategy. The strategy came afterwards. So why we're backfitting something, and also the whole idea of flexibility and being agile. So we are seeing these topics coming up. So can we, as a group, come up with a paper and say how climate change impacts girls' rights? Why is it important now given all of these issues? I think maybe a one-page brief could help to maybe put it down, because to me this whole overemphasis on AOGD is something that's really worrying. Maybe if they don't know, I'm just assuming, maybe the person who made that comment doesn't know how it is. It's not about distributing solar panels or whatever. There is a reason for that programming, and it's about being gender aware, transforming how we look at girls, etc. Maybe that kind of one pager could raise awareness. Because clearly there's a difference between what we are saying and what people who control the funding model are saying. So I'm just throwing it out. It will help to position us, because otherwise we will become boxes of 6 things which are not relevant in a few years. And by the time the new strategy comes, do you think the donors will go and ask us for submitting proposals? You've reached the boat already.
Yes. I'm liking this kind of discussion. This is curious. How long have we got? We're over, right?
Just 2 minutes.
No, I don't want to stop. I want to suggest, this is the last session of the topic for today. We could have a snapshot and we have a coffee break. Now we could say the coffee break is the end of the session. And then it's up to you whether we start with the coffee break at 4:30 up to 5, or whether we start at 5 to 5 and leave the coffee inside and go out for the coffee break. Because remember, we have to be out at 5. So it's up to you. I don't mind if we continue like this in this round now, more or less up to 5 o'clock. There is one snapshot which could be presented tonight, but it also could be presented tomorrow morning. So, and I don't know from any other snapshot. So I wouldn't mind to continue this discussion until we come closer to 5 o'clock and then close it.
I think it's close. We're going outside. We're going to energy, we're going to funding model. It's actually quite useful, example to go to the rest of the agenda, actually, gathering tomorrow.
Yes, to add to what Tajina said, if we can present, to me, climate change issue is the super thematic area. It's not a question of dealing with, we have 6 thematic areas. It's our responsibility as a global organization to address this global issue. For me, it's so obvious. So we can, for example, I'm sure that if we address climate change issue, we can improve our achievement in each systematic areas. So we can see these things like this and how climate change, the way we will address climate change will reinforce our work in these systematic areas. We will not work because we are an organization that protects girls' rights, but because we are agile and we are living in this world and we should address global issues. For me, it's so obvious.
I didn't get it. Please, sorry.
I said that
for the minutes.
Climate
But
change.
it's pretty much, I kind of feel like it's similar to what you're saying, which is
Yeah.
you can have your six, but
Yeah.
you should also more generally say there are these global things, climate change, migration, etc., and you can't ignore them, otherwise, you know, it's ridiculous. So they have to be cross-cutting, matrix, as you said, and we have to be flexible in using them. And the worry is we can stretch out into the six, so the depends on which don't exist, which is crazy.
I think, you know, from a country perspective, I would say, you know, building up on what Manu was also saying, it's also about how you package within the six areas of global system. They're quite broad. We work on migration, but we work it out primarily in the areas of lead and learn. If I use the plan terminology, it's about youth groups. It's about, you know, really bringing youngsters, adults and girls into leadership at local level. It's about livelihood support to you know, youngsters who are at risk of migration, illegal migration. So it's not that we are ignoring the issue, but we are just packaging it in a way that fits into our areas of global distinctiveness. And I think it's not that difficult. So even if it is about distributing at some stage solar lights in an area, it really depends. Is it just dumping some solar lights, or we have money to do something more than that? And if it is just money to dump solar lights, then I think, yeah, we shouldn't be doing it. Somebody else is a better place to do it. As planned, we should be then putting money from wherever other sources to say, okay, yes, we will bring these solar lights, but they will, in X, Y, and Z manner, make life better for girls, maybe reduce gender-based violence in villages, you know, sexual harassment, blah, blah. That is, I think, the practical way forward. That's how I would do it.
See, I think we are all talking, because in the strategy itself, it's mentioned that plan will try to address the root causes of all these issues. One of the root causes, see, climate change is a theme for intervention, but it's also a root cause. So we are looking at climate change more as a cause which has an impact, as you rightly mentioned, that it is triggering certain actions related to sexual reproductive health issues or child protection or gender-based violence. So it's basically how you look at the picture. So I think it would not be a difficult thing for us to, and I agree with what Tanjina is mentioning, that if there are people who are not able to understand, maybe as a group we can come up with a small note or a paper or whatever to be able to convince people why we are talking about these things and giving emphasis or primacy.
I think, you know, a good thing would be that this 42 million euro programming that we have, I think what can be built upon it, how this kind of programming, whether it is the 4CA that started in Southeast Asia or Safe School, how is it helping us to achieve the areas of global distinctiveness? I think that's the starting point.
I'm just going to give this
I mean, I just have one thing about process what I shared also with our team, and that last year when the IBIP team had the meeting in Helsinki, so we had actually thought, okay, what is the topic we want to put on the agenda? And we had a long discussion presentation about climate change, why plan has to take climate change to the agenda of the whole organization. And then there was a lot of interesting enthusiasm and positive feedback, and I think after that, so I think what we should ask tomorrow from Gabriela, they had last January or December a Horizons planning on climate change on IH, and they had a specific workshop on that. So what happened after that, and what has happened to that workshop? So that after that, I mean, that was they were supposed to present that for ET, but I suppose because of the funding model that got delayed. So it would be interesting to hear from Gabriela, I mean, what has happened after the Horizon Standard Capture. So that has been discussed there last year, both in the IB and executive team. So just interested to hear from Gabriela how they see the moment.
Well, I think where it gets a bit funky, because we can do the slicing and dicing. I don't think the response. So these have been the issues that we've struggled with. Because you can write them in as components within 6 areas. But actually that logic that is more encompassing. And the two issues that we're really struggling with on the one hand is resourcing. So you think about it, you resource where the 6 areas are, you don't resource where the cost. Quite difficult to actually get the global attention and investment as we're finding. Something that we all agree is, an encompassing issue. But we actually don't have a lot of investment. More people employed to organize meetings and plans. But the second issue comes when we're dealing with the individual country office strategies. This is where we're really struggling, because the country offices choose between the ministers. They're told to choose. They really might have 5, but others are told to have 3. Just as an example. But we're dealing with individual country offices, and we're saying there's an opportunity for climate change program that will advance absolutely 1 or even 2 of the AOTDs, proposed AOTDs. Somehow we've got a mismatch in the sense of that. Then it does get like the principle of grind, because we're not able to actually, in a sense, kind of work a bit more strategically or flexibly, to deploy into areas of opportunity will actually get us to something creative. I think the internal operational makeup of our federation, in the way that we design priorities, is not limited to areas of opportunity. I'm not saying that's the overall game. I actually agree with the folks. We're all over the place. But it does mean that you still have to look and say, there are areas where these tensions exist. We can work better in these areas of tension and not have it like, no, this doesn't fit, that doesn't fit. And that's my sense of what's happening tomorrow. The country officers saying, look, our country strategy is only focused on 3 things, this is not one of the 3 things, no. Or you've got statements being made, this doesn't fit the strategy. And actually the NO would have the advocate saying, I don't know how you actually manage that, because we seem to create that. And like I said, really, in the main, we're all like driving into the climate, wash, humanitarian response, I would say, is still an issue that doesn't quite work to slice and dice. And we seem to be struggling to deal with it. I don't know what the answer is, but somehow we're going to find a way to just go like that.
I think that we are sort of mixing apples and pears here a little bit, to be honest, because the 6 areas of global distinctiveness are sectors, technical sectors, that have their own standards of what you should achieve and so on, that are standardized across our whole sort of world in terms of the aid world, where we can relate to those and we can follow up and so on. But then we're talking about sort of themes that actually then impact them, that are not sectors of their own. Remember that gender is not an AOGD. It's actually something that is cross-cutting across all of the AOGDs, just as conflict or migration could, just as climate change could. So I think that we are making it a little bit too difficult for ourselves when we're trying to, I would say again, like this is about this sort of packaging, and I really agree with what Muntase is saying. And we are packaging in one way towards our donors to convince them that yes, we really do fit your strategy and we're really implementing it. But we also need to see, okay, but actually the Safe Schools program, that is a DRR program, we put under education. Because the main impact that we want to see is that children continue their education even if there is cyclones or floods or droughts. So it's an education program. But we can sell it towards the donor that we're working on climate change, or it doesn't really matter. But we need to be very clear of what we are trying to tackle of the situation on the ground and what type of impact we want to see for actually the children, and particularly the girls that we are working with. Because if we only try to take the language from the donors and then push that into our organization, that's when I think we have these reactions from people that are sitting, no, we want to create impact in these areas with these themes. If we try to, we need to be the brokers, especially us as NO staff that work in programs, we need to be the brokers between the donor and our organization. That's sort of what I see as one of our main jobs. And we can do it, I think. It's not so, it's not that complicated.
So I don't know, but I am really love the comments. It was a fun meeting in the session. And in a way where it feels like most of security agree, but we're picking up quite a lot of noise from your example, or Dave saying, I took that on as well, that our approach is too straightforward. It doesn't allow for the sort of metrics, or it's looks like it's like we're all already agreeing, but people who are not in this room, it feels like, and they're the ones who want to pay them anymore, don't agree with us. Now that might be unfair, so we should give them a chance, right? And we should play a challenge.
But then we should always play it back and say, okay, gender is not an AOGD. I mean, to be honest, like that, it just doesn't really make sense. Like, gender is not. So then if we're saying, no, we should not work on gender, because it's not education, why you should
like, we have the gender transformative
approach.
Yeah. So that gender, so you're totally right. We have this as an explicit, as a cross-cutting theme. For me, in Germany, in GNO, we have participation as second cross-cutting theme in our work. And then, we
don't have environment, we don't have migration.
So maybe that's the question then. Which are the cross-cutting areas that we are missing out?
And then statements like no solar panels is factually very unhelpful. It's just too enormous. It doesn't take account of reality.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
This goes back to the comment that Dave made in the morning. Because to us it's very obvious that you can't do one or the other, and more research is saying that you need comprehensive approaches. The old school of Greek health, vaccination, and those kind of things were long ago when I started my career. Those are gone. So the question is, what is the motive behind it? Maybe I'm stepping a bit further back. Why are these questions coming up so strictly during the funding model climate? Does the organization want to grow, or do they not want to grow? The other thing we are hearing is, and also just wanting to grow for the sake of growth. I'm not aware of one grant here, maybe one or two bad examples. 99% of the work is actually good quality work. So where is this coming from that we need to be narrow? So maybe there is no growth agenda. We need to reduce our footprint and do only advocacy. But then how do you do advocacy if you do not do program implementation? Where does this come from? So I think there is something bigger, because this whole narrative towards AOGD is a new thing. We didn't hear it last year. AOGDs were there before the new strategy came. So that's why this whole gender thing came later. So my question is, what is it that's driving this conversation. And if the organization doesn't want to grow, then how do you reach the 100 million reasons? Is it just by doing advocacy and saying how many people showed up in your social media account? Or is it we want to do real good quality programming? So I think there has to be an open discussion on what is the vision. Till date, we haven't heard anything to say what does Plan 1 to be in the next 5 years. If only 2 topics are to be selected as a country strategic priority, of course that country will reduce. That's very obvious. You can't, the donors are not just waiting to give the money what you want. We are just one little player in the bigger ecosystem. So what is the goal? I'm just throwing it out as a question. Is it the funding model objective is to reduce our footprint? Okay, that's one objective. So maybe we should call it out. The plan should not be at 700 million or whatever the size is now. We want to be a smaller organization, do only niche things. That's one option. But if that's the option, the global option 1, or is it we are talking about being an agile organization that's aligned to this? I think the strategy is good. It's the question of how we interpret the strategy, and that these interpretations are coming out now. I'm saying during the funding one, they're very restrictive. It's not being planned as an agile organization. It's going not to what the communities we work. It's our interpretation of these narrow AOGDs, how we want it.
I have one question on that. I was just wondering this was tomorrow in the discussion. Is this sort of, it feels like it's really important for us as an NOPD because there's lack of taking account of the donors. So there's this heavy, and rightly so this is all about balance, right? This is all about right. Obviously you've got to have country context and you've got to respond to the needs of girls and children in their country. Bottom up. But we know you can't just do that and ignore donors. Unfortunately, donors are far from it. And in this context, in this discussion, if we just chopped off saying we won't go any green funding, well then we're all donors are dramatically running out of funding. So we're literally self-harming by saying, well, we're putting out huge sprays of funding to go through. And that obviously has an impact on girls because there's less money playing with less forward. So but it just feels like that end of things, the counting for donors, the narrative, that's just been lost. It's just you're too blunt and too exalted approach. Sorry, yeah.
I feel this is truly interesting to me, and
you want to join?
I mean, most of the countries we work in have girls and young people. So, I mean, the target group is there. I would be very surprised if, with the 6 areas as I know them, 7 weeks, would prevent Plan from being present in the country. It might be a challenge the way we do some of our business today because it doesn't really fit with the problem. I think as a business strategy for the future, focusing and narrowing down our is the key to success. I think specializing is what the donors are looking for. I mean, I remember when I started 24 years ago, they were happy to have agencies who were specialists in everything, and we were happy to get things are changing. And so our key to success is being specialized and a bit narrow, meaning that maybe in the short term, yes, sorry, that project, but I see, I mean, the potential to change and it gives us a distinct voice compared to say, it stands out as this is the recipe for success.
Could I comment back on what you were saying around the donors? Or is this also the donor? Because I think that we need to be a little bit, I understand where you're coming from because that's our reality that we are working on as sort of PDs of, different parts, but the majority of us are from NOs, but we need to be a little bit self-reflective. I mean, the organization is almost, I would say, to the majority driven by our donors. Like, I mean, the setup that we have in our governance structure is driven by the global north. That's where all the power is. So I think that's why, sometimes when we're having this conversation with our global colleagues, it becomes a little bit strange when sort of from the NO side, we're only pushing donor priorities when everyone else is seeing like, okay, the CEOs doesn't even have a vote. Like, of course, it's the donors that are driving, no matter if there's private donors from a marketing perspective or it's from a grants perspective, whereas our institutional donors. So we need to also remember that they are already setting quite a lot of the politics and the priorities of our organization. So we should try to find, I would prefer if we had more focus on what is happening on the ground and actually have children and young people, and in particular girls, be part of shaping what we want to do in our project, and then selling that to our donors, not the other way around. Because if we come in with that perspective, we are really, then we can definitely forget of a growth agenda and sort of, being able to sell ourselves as a niche. So it's just, we are the reality, but we all started with this morning of saying, yeah, this is a very important meeting with a lot of important people. Yeah, and it's their NO meeting. Sorry to say, the NDT is an NO meeting.
Yeah.
It's the donors who are driving the agenda in plan. And we should do everything we can, if we are still in this structure, to make sure that we are putting the priorities from our countries and from the children we are working with. Because if not, we're missing the target completely. Our customers are not, for me, the donors. Our customers, it's the children and young people we are working with in our programs. Those are the ones we're trying to create some change for. So we should never lose sight of what it means.
No, but the point is that the donors are also studying the communities, and they are also coming from that vantage point. It's not that donors are just saying things because they want to. They are equally, they have data, they have evidence of the disaster.
Yeah.
That's what they will study.
Just pick up on what it's good. Yeah. Both discussions. So there's an interesting, if I understand you, sort of a harder edge in the same sort of discipline, where we should really be positioning ourselves as a girls organisation. That's the point, isn't it, to say. And the critical thing is, because anyone can disagree with that, in order to do that, you then have to limit what you actually do. So, I mean, my view on it is you can actually have capability, which is you can devote influence in the advocacy, the branding, the marketing, position yourself as ruthlessly the world's leading girls organisation or civil society organisation, but still maintaining flexibility is common theory about you're in the six, but you can flex them when the environment and migration events. You can actually both. So you say no?
I don't know if what you said was a reaction or a critique of what I said, but obviously
no.
I mean, it's based on it's matching in the realities on the ground. So it's not us going around looking for people who will do our agenda and politics on the panels, but if that is what they suggest, then yes, but we need to make that link between what we do on the ground. Of course, it drives us towards our overall objectives, but that's our, we will look for our like-mindeds, and it's not looking for somebody ready to do our responses. No, that's.
I think I'm building on what a lot of other people have said. I think that we need to look at each program to think about, is this contributing as much as we can to the bigger issue of girls' rights? And we have to be wary about seeing the big number and saying, oh, it's a big load of money, and yeah, it kind of fits, so we'll go for it. Because sometimes those big projects suck up so much management time that they stop us from doing the other stuff, which actually might be more important. So I'll give you an example. I don't want to create another trouble assignment, but let's pick on WASH in Bangladesh. We've got a track record of success. We've got some great big programs, paid by results, we're making a huge profit off that. But you know what? It's a huge management suck. There's something that, yeah, okay, there's girls' rights, there's some benefits there, WASH in schools, yeah, it's all good, keep girls in school. But for the bulk of the program and the management cost, it's not really what we should be doing there. Should we instead say, early marriage, gender-based violence, massively bigger issues for girls' rights than toilets in schools, probably in Bangladesh. And I wonder if we should look at climate change through the same lens and say, if you're saying €10 million in West Africa, and that's very attractive and exciting. How much of that is really about girls' rights and children's rights, and how much of it is actually just the bigger question of climate change? And that's the balance we have to decide. If we're a girls' rights organisation, we shouldn't be moths around the flame of a big number. We should be fighting for that opportunity.
Yes, I agree. And secondly, I'm just asking myself, because first of all, growth and gender equality, whatever has to do with that, yeah. Children's rights organization with really the uniqueness of gender equality and growth, young women, which makes up more than 50% of the population, right? Bear that in mind. So you will, wherever you are, always, if it's in a city, in a small village, in a town, or in a mega city, always find enough issues which we work on to ensure that we really eliminate the root causes why we have gender oppression and why we have the majority of women and girls oppressed in this wonderful world. We believe if we have gender equality, we hopefully have also ensured that boys and girls are not suffering from poverty and state. Right? So what I just wanted to say is, are we really the best place, in my opinion, to now talk and position ourselves as the environmental and climate change organization? Would be my question. Are not other partners, other really great organizations, because there are small partners across the world doing already great work, and maybe, yes, we could partner with them on the ground because we would bring them the lens to ensure that really gender equality plays a role in their work, that has this positive impact on the girls and children. That I would ask myself as well. Because I think even though we have decided that we want to be the go-to girls' rights organization, I come from women's rights movement, right? I really have to say Plan International was not always on our radar. I have to admit, sorry. Can we please maybe start ensuring that we are really the right partners for the women and girls working on the ground and really knowing what's happening? So I think that would be something that I would really wish us to a little bit more put emphasis behind it, to be truly the go-to girls' rights and young women's organization, because then we have our legitimacy, we have our reputation, and I had this conversation with Jan, and we always I think what we forget, they've got their strategies, the diverse funders and donors. There are many, it's not only governmental or EU or we can speak OECD, the World Economic Forum, but we could also talk about the corporate, but then the corporates have their private family foundations, then we have political foundations. I mean, really, please, also them we have to target differently. As a program director, I can't go with one and the same recipe, in my opinion, if I really want to get the funding for the work that is needed to be done on the ground. I just wanted to say I'm losing my thread, I recognize now heavily. Yes, getting late. It's just that I think really, yes, we should concentrate on the fact that we are the girls' rights movement internationally, and that we should really ensure that people rely on us. And I tell you, my experience as funders, they will trust us. And if we come and say the climate change, or there were floods, and that is related, research shows me, to climate change, and we can tell you how we can ensure that children and girls or young women are not impacted or can empowered, whatever, they will listen to us. And you can even influence funders. And you should influence funders, because maybe they're not aware of things. You know what I mean? Therefore, we are there, we come and say, we talk about our experience. We say, hey, look, we want to be partners, right? We say, look, how can we together improve? And there's maybe a gap in your analysis, or maybe you have a complete blind spot. And I just wanted to share with you that it would make sense also for your impact to have a closer look at it. So, I mean, it's not only that donors and funders are coming and telling us. I was a board member of a foundation which was funded by 4 foundations, and there are really many who want to learn from us. They don't want to just invest money without knowing for what.
So we need to go to the other side.
Yes, yes, yes.
How will we talk about
10 more minutes.
10 more minutes. I have a serious.
can't join him.
Well, the question is whether we should then
wrap up?
Wrap up.
I mean, I would have a different view. Maybe you have but I think this has been actually very useful. And it's obviously broadened out from climate environment. It's also a case study of vehicle for lots of bigger issues, which we will hopefully address tomorrow, and hopefully we'll address more effectively tomorrow. We've almost had a prelude about some of the public mechanism issues that we're going to bring up. So I personally think it's been quite meaty and substantive and useful.
You need to come tomorrow.
Maybe I'm newbie. Okay, back to you guys.
Good, great. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
We have another coffee break, and then the day is over, I would say. We will not have a snapshot tonight. We will start with a kind of recap tomorrow morning, and then have a snapshot before we start with the funding model. And the last discussion was already a kind of nice warming up. And then we follow the plans for tomorrow. Anything from your side? We will be at the glass tomorrow and Thursday, so just leaving this house and right? No, Gabriel is only in for the last session tomorrow. And it may be, let us see how the funding model goes. It may be that we have to inform her that she should reduce her presentation and be open more for our questions. Depending on the work we are now, then also discussing the funding model tomorrow. And I mean, Gabriela will not solve all our questions or have answers for all our questions. Let us see how much we have, and you may even try to add 1 or 2 or 3 questions to there on this flip chart or on in your notes somewhere, and then we collect them tomorrow morning so that we have them somehow already there when she comes in this week. I'll take this and that. Okay. Anything else? Good. Then thanks for the day. This evening it's 3 Fridays. And yeah. Yeah. So here's a very good suggestion that we can work tomorrow up to 7 o'clock in the evening. And we'll see how it goes. We'll see how the funding model goes, how many questions we have. But be prepared to be in the room until 7 o'clock in the evening. I will also inform her on that. And we have well, we have accepted already because I only saw nodding at that table there. No, we will, now, this is the over today. We will have a long day tomorrow, maybe until 7 o'clock. The dinner I'm still working on the dinner for 7:30 tomorrow night. We'll see, but we'll somehow survive. And I think if we have this relaxed atmosphere of today, we will continue until 7 without any big problems on that one. Good, and we will have our Thank you very much. Have a good evening. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow at 8:30. No, 8:30 in the club, and I don't know exactly where, but the people there know. So be there 5 minutes earlier to find your room.
I don't understand. You know, the people are starting to go to this level. I said, yes, but you know, yes. And then when you start to question everything and quality income, quality income, I mean, how much will bring no quality income in such a way that after it will be quality? Then